The Tale of Redemption at the Corner Bakery. An elderly man, named Elias Carter, fragile and tired, entered the small bakery. His clothes were worn, his feet bare and wounded from the journey. This bakery had once been a place of joy with his beloved wife, Clara, but now it felt like a distant memory. As Elias pushed open the glass door, the bell announced his arrival. The eyes of the customers shifted towards him, some with curiosity, others with disdain. Here was a man whose face was etched with wrinkles, every line telling a story of hardship and loss. He approached the counter, his hands trembling as he gripped the edges of his old jacket for warmth. "Excuse me," Elias murmured, his voice barely rising above the chatter of the bakery. "Could you give me a glass of water, please? And if you have any bread that you didn't sell, I would appreciate it." The young attendant, Liam, looked at Elias with a cold gaze. "We don't give away food here. If you don't have money, I suggest you look elsewhere," he said, pointing towards the exit. The customers resumed their conversations, oblivious to the humiliation unfolding before them. Elias bowed his head, the weight of shame heavy on his shoulders. "I understand. I'm sorry to bother you," he murmured, turning to leave. His voice was weak, his words trembling, signs of a man who, despite his misery, tried to maintain a shred of dignity. The bakery manager, Daniel, observed the scene from near the cash register. Frowning at Elias's condition, he approached. "What's happening here?" he asked in a calmer, inquiring tone. "Nothing much, boss, just a beggar asking for alms," Liam responded indifferently. Daniel looked closer at Elias, a sense of familiarity stirring within him. "Wait a moment," he said, leaning forward. "I know you from somewhere, don't I?" Elias avoided Daniel's gaze, but something in the manager's expression compelled him to stop. He took a deep breath, as if the words he was about to speak were an additional burden. "No, you must be confusing me with someone else." "No, I'm sure," Daniel insisted, his look intrigued. "What's your name?" Reluctantly, Elias murmured, almost inaudibly, "Elias Carter." Upon hearing the name, Daniel froze. It was impossible. Elias Carter, once the wealthiest man in the city, a philanthropist known for his generosity, was now begging for bread. The shock was evident on Daniel's face as he processed this revelation. "Boss, do you know this guy?" Liam asked, puzzled. "Yes, I do," Daniel replied, still processing. "This man is Elias Carter, one of the richest men this city has ever seen." Whispers spread among the customers, their eyes now filled with a mix of surprise and disbelief. How could this man, once synonymous with prosperity, be in such a state? Elias felt the gazes upon him, bowing his head even lower, his eyes reflecting shame and sadness. "Elias," Daniel said more gently, "what happened to you?" Elias lifted his eyes, and for a moment, his gaze met Daniel's. "Life happened," he replied before turning to leave. Daniel, still in shock, made a quick decision. "Bring him a glass of water and some fresh bread now," he ordered Liam, who hesitated. "But, boss," Liam began. "Now," Daniel insisted firmly. It wasn't just an order, it was a gesture of humanity. Elias looked surprised and grateful, a brief spark of hope in his eyes. He accepted Daniel's offer, moving slowly as if each step carried a heavy burden. Liam, still displeased, handed over the water and bread with visible disdain. Elias thanked him softly, moved to a table by the door where he could observe the street's activity while distancing himself from curious glances. Daniel watched from his spot, memories flooding back. Elias Carter had been an iconic figure, a successful businessman, the owner of numerous companies responsible for many jobs. More than that, he was known for his kindness. Daniel remembered when he was younger, Elias often visited the bakery with Clara, a couple admired by all. Daniel decided to approach Elias, pulling up a chair in front of the elderly man who was absorbed in eating the bread as if it were a blessing after days of nothing. "Elias," Daniel started, unsure how to begin but feeling he owed this man something for all his past generosity. "Time passes, Daniel, and it takes a lot with it," Elias said, his voice reflecting the depth of his losses. "I remember when you and Clara used to come here every Sunday," Daniel continued, trying to lighten the mood. "You always ordered the same breads and that coffee she loved so much." Hearing Clara's name, Elias closed his eyes momentarily, the pain of memory intense. "We were happy, Daniel. She was." His voice faltered as he took a deep breath to regain composure. "She was everything to me. When she left, I lost more than a wife, I lost my way, my will to go on." Daniel nodded, feeling the emotion. "I remember how sad everyone was when they heard what happened." "I'm so sorry, Elias." "And your businesses, what happened to them?" Elias looked away, the pain of discussing it palpable. "Without Clara, nothing mattered anymore. I couldn't work anymore, the numbers, the contracts, everything felt empty. Gradually, everything I built began to crumble, and by the time I realized it, it was too late to save what was left." The silence between them was profound. Daniel observed Elias, once so strong and vibrant, now a shadow of his former self. He thought of all the times Elias had helped the city, including generous donations to the bakery during tough times. Daniel knew he couldn't let this meeting end like this. "Listen, Elias," Daniel said firmly. "I can't let you leave here like this. What do you think about accepting my help? I want to offer you a full meal, and if you need a place to stay, we can figure that out too." Elias shook his head, trying to refuse. "I can't accept, Daniel. I've already received too much from you, more than I deserve." "Don't say that. You've done so much for this city, for me, and for so many others." "It's the least I can do," Daniel extended his hand in solidarity. Elias hesitated, but seeing the sincerity in Daniel's eyes, something inside him warned. With a slight smile, he accepted the handshake. "Thank you, Daniel. Maybe I still have something to learn about second chances." Daniel nodded, feeling that this moment was changing something for the better. Looking at Elias, he realized this encounter was not just a coincidence but an opportunity to rewrite a story that still had much to tell. The bakery continued its usual hustle while Elias and Daniel talked. Elias felt a lightness returning, his mind drifting back to the glory days with Clara. Looking at the fresh bread in his hands, memories surged, and he couldn't help but get lost in them. Years ago, Elias's life was completely different. He was a successful businessman, owner of an empire spanning construction to technology. Known for his intelligence, what truly set him apart was his generous heart. He believed wealth should improve lives and was famous for his donations to hospitals, schools, and local businesses. With Clara by his side, Elias seemed to have it all. They were inseparable, and the bakery had been one of their favorite spots. Every Sunday after church, they would walk there, Clara always holding his arm, smiling at everyone. Elias remembered how she always ordered a coffee with milk and the same type of bread he now ate, savoring each piece as if it were treasure. The laughter and conversations with Clara were the week's highlight. They talked about everything, from business to travel plans. Clara was his safe harbor, the anchor that kept him steady even on the most turbulent days. But then, the unexpected happened. Clara began to feel unwell, diagnosed with cancer. Elias's world crumbled. He did everything to save her, spending fortunes on treatments, traveling to the best medical centers, consulting renowned doctors. During this time, he nearly abandoned his business, pouring all his energy into trying to cure her. The days in the hospital were the longest of his life, sitting by her bedside, witnessing her resilience even in pain, trying to keep hope alive, but daily watching the disease consume her. Clara, however, always smiled at him, saying everything would be okay, even when they both knew the reality was different. Daniel observed the distant look in Elias's eyes as he relived those painful memories. The elderly man, lost in thought, spoke in a choked voice about every detail, every word Clara said to comfort him. He did everything, but it wasn't enough. When Clara left, something inside me died with her, Elias said, his voice thick with sorrow. The business no longer made sense, the money, the events, the people, everything felt empty, purposeless. I tried to find meaning, but it was as if life had lost all its colors. Daniel nodded silently, allowing Elias to vent. I'm so sorry, Elias. I remember how dedicated you were to her. You were an example to us all. Elias shook his head, a sad smile forming. When she left, I lost everything. The money was gone, but that wasn't what hurt, it was her absence, the emptiness she left behind, the pain I couldn't fathom. The silence between them created an intimate moment. Daniel now understood the depth of what Elias had faced. He knew that the man in front of him was not just another elderly person on the street but someone who had lost everything that truly mattered. I know nothing can bring Clara back, Daniel said softly, but perhaps little by little, you can find a new purpose, something that honors her and makes you feel alive again. Elias sighed, his eyes filling with tears. It's hard, Daniel. All these years, I've tried, but it seems that without her, I'm lost. Maybe I have to accept that some things have no return. Daniel, determined to help, gave a slight smile. Sometimes life takes a lot from us, but it also gives us chances to start over. If you allow me, Elias, I would like to help rebuild something for you. Let's start with a hot coffee, some fresh bread, and then we'll see where it takes us. Elias, with tears in his eyes, felt for the first time in a long while a small ray of hope. He didn't know if he was ready to start over, but Daniel's presence and gesture of solidarity opened a door he thought was closed forever. The bakery's silence was filled with the sounds of cups and discreet conversations. Elias, moved by the memories that surfaced, continued his story, feeling the need to share with Daniel the reasons that led him to this situation. It was as if by sharing his pain, he could lighten some of the weight he had carried for so long. When Clara left, Elias began, his voice heavy with sorrow. I was no longer the same. I tried to carry on, tried to be the man she admired, but the emptiness was too deep. Every corner of the house, every memory of us suffocated me. It was as if the world had grown colder and darker. Daniel listened attentively, his eyes showing genuine empathy. I imagine it must have been a very difficult time, Elias. But what about your businesses? Why didn't you continue? Elias took a deep breath, his eyes lost in the void. Without her, the businesses seemed irrelevant. I used to make all the crucial decisions with Clara by my side. She was my balance, my support. When she left, every decision, every meeting seemed pointless. Gradually, I began to withdraw, letting my partners take control. They tried to convince me to come back, but I couldn't, everything felt lifeless. Daniel nodded, understanding the depth of Elias's pain. So, they took control of the companies? Yes, Elias confirmed, his gaze revealing a mix of resignation and sadness. Over time, the companies began to fall apart. The partners started selling assets to try to save what was left, but I didn't care anymore. I didn't fight because, for me, nothing made sense anymore. I had lost my reason for being. Elias remembered how everything quickly deteriorated. His companies, once prosperous, began facing financial crises, projects were cancelled, debts piled up, and the people he had trusted made questionable decisions. Elias, enveloped in grief, withdrew even further, letting things take their course. I became a ghost, Daniel, Elias confessed, his voice a whisper. I saw the news about my businesses closing, heard how everything was falling apart, but I didn't have the strength to react. My grief was like a prison from which I couldn't escape. And your friends? Daniel asked, trying to understand why no one had reached out to help. Elias let out a bitter laugh. Friends? When the money started to disappear, they disappeared too. Those I thought would stand by me, who shared my joys in good times, were the first to distance themselves. Little by little, I became more and more alone until one day I realized there was no one left. Daniel felt a pang in his heart. He knew life could be cruel, but hearing Elias's story, someone who had done so much for the city, was hard to accept. It's unfair, Elias. You've done so much for so many people. I remember your donations, your initiatives to help those in need, and now. Elias shook his head, interrupting him. I did it because I believed I could change something, but in the end, when I needed help, the same people I once helped forgot about me. That's how the world works, Daniel. When you have nothing left to offer, you become invisible. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes shining with determination. But I won't let you disappear, Elias. Not after everything you've done for this city. We'll find a way to rebuild your life, even if it's one step at a time. Elias smiled, but it was a sad smile, as if he no longer expected much from life. I appreciate your words, Daniel. You are one of the few who still remember me with kindness, but rebuilding everything I've lost. He sighed deeply. I don't know if I still have the strength for that. Sometimes it seems the easiest thing would be to accept what fate has in store for me. Daniel, however, was resolute. He stood up, pulling a chair closer to Elias. You still have a lot to live for, Elias. I know it seems impossible right now, but you're not alone. I'm here, and together, we'll find a way. Elias remained silent for a moment, absorbing Daniel's words. There was something comforting in knowing that even after everything, someone still remembered him with care and was willing to help. With a slight nod, he accepted the gesture, allowing Daniel to see that despite all the losses in his worn appearance, there was still some strength and dignity left within him. Let's do this, Daniel said as he stood up. I'll prepare something better for you. He turned to Liam and ordered, bring a full meal for Elias with hot coffee and the best bread we have. And I want you to treat our customer with respect. Liam hesitated, still incredulous at how Daniel was treating a man he considered just another homeless person. But seeing the seriousness in his boss's face, he complied, returning with a well-served tray, placing it on the table with a resigned air, saying nothing more. Thank you, Daniel, Elias said, his voice still laden with emotion. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me, Elias, Daniel replied with a sincere smile. You've done so much for this city and for all of us. Now it's our turn to give back, even if it's with a plate of food. As Elias began to eat, Daniel sat down again in front of him. He watched the elderly man savor each bite as if it were the first decent meal he had in ages. Daniel knew that this help was just the beginning, but he also understood that for Elias, every gesture mattered. I've always wondered how you were, Daniel said, breaking the silence. After the businesses closed, you disappeared. No one talked about you anymore, and gradually people began to forget. Elias paused, holding the cup of coffee with trembling hands, and sighed. I withdrew because, honestly, I didn't want people to see me like this. It was easier to disappear. When you're on top, everyone looks up to you, but when you fall. He paused, searching for the right words. When you fall, people prefer to forget. And to be honest, I also wanted to be forgotten. Daniel nodded, understanding the feeling. It's hard to face all of this, but you know what? I believe there is still a way for you. It doesn't have to be the same as before. Maybe it's a new path, something different, but that still brings meaning to your life. Elias looked up, feeling the sincerity in Daniel's words. For a moment, he allowed himself to believe that perhaps he could start over, even after everything. And how do you suggest I do that, Daniel? He asked with a faint smile. I have nothing left, and even if I wanted to, I don't know where to start. Daniel leaned forward as if revealing a plan. Well, I thought of something simple to start with. How about working here at the bakery with me? It doesn't have to be anything big, but you can help me with some tasks, and in return, you'll have a place to stay and food every day. Gradually, you can re-establish yourself, finding a purpose. Elias fell silent, processing the offer. It was a generous gesture, something he never expected after everything he had been through. You would really do that for me, Daniel? He asked, his voice filled with disbelief and emotion. I'm not the man I used to be. I don't have the same energy nor the same disposition. I know, Elias, Daniel replied, his eyes firm and confident. But you are still a valuable person, and here, you will always have a place. It's not about who you were, but who you can be now. He gave a slight smile. Besides, I think this bakery still remembers who you were, and so do I. Daniel's words touched Elias deeply. He felt tears welling up in his eyes, but this time, it wasn't just sadness, it was the emotion of knowing that despite everything, there was still someone willing to believe in him, to give him a chance. For years, he had carried the burden of his fall alone, but now, in that small moment, he allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. "All right, Daniel," Elias said with a faint smile and watery eyes. "I accept your offer. Let's start here. Who knows, little by little, I might find my way back." Daniel smiled widely, satisfied. "That's all I needed to hear, my friend. Let's do this together." He extended his hand to Elias, who shook it firmly, sealing a pact of friendship and renewal. As Elias finished his meal, Daniel was already making plans in his mind about how he would help his friends start over. The atmosphere in the bakery began to change as Elias and Daniel talked. Daniel's gesture of offering a full meal and a place at the bakery for Elias caught the attention of other customers. Those who had previously looked at Elias with disdain or indifference now murmured among themselves, surprised by the revelation that this man, appearing as just another beggar, was, in fact, the famous Elias Carter, the philanthropist who once helped so many in the city. Some older customers immediately recalled Elias's glory days. They remembered his generous donations and Clara's warm smile, always by his side. Gradually, Elias's story spread across the tables, and the looks of disdain transformed into looks of pity and regret. "It can't be," a lady murmured, watching Elias as he ate. "I remember him. He and his wife used to come here all the time. How sad to see him like this." Another customer, a middle-aged man, approached Elias and Daniel's table, removing his hat in a respectful gesture. "Mr. Carter, I didn't know it was you. I'm so sorry." He looked at Daniel for permission to continue. "If you'll allow me, I would like to pay for his meal. It's the least I can do after everything he has done for our city." Elias, surprised and touched by the gesture, shook his head. "I greatly appreciate your generosity, but Daniel has already taken care of me." "You don't owe me anything," he spoke humbly, trying to hide the emotion welling up in his eyes. The man insisted, his voice filled with sincerity. "You don't understand, Mr. Carter. What you did for all of us back then was never forgotten. I have my job because of the opportunities you created. We are grateful, and now it's our turn to give back in some way." Other customers began to rise and approach, each with a piece of their story to tell about how Elias had, in some way, impacted their lives. A young woman, tears in her eyes, remembered how Elias donated funds to a local hospital that treated her mother years ago. An older gentleman, visibly emotional, thanked Elias for the support he received to open his small hardware store. "You never let us down," the man said, shaking Elias's hand firmly. "And now it's our turn to extend a hand to you." Moved by the words and the presence of so many people he had helped in the past, Elias felt tears streaming down his face. For so many years, he had felt alone, forgotten, as if everything he had done no longer mattered. But there, in that moment, he realized that the seeds he had planted in the past were still blooming in the hearts of many. Daniel, observing the emotion around him, felt proud to have taken that first step to help Elias. He knew there was something special about that bakery, something that went beyond a simple business establishment. It was a place of memories and bonds created over the years, and at that moment, he saw the power those bonds still held. "It's moving to see how beloved you are, Elias," Daniel said, smiling. "It shows that the impact you had was never forgotten, even if it took a while to manifest." Elias, now surrounded by familiar faces, felt that something had changed within him. The shame he had felt upon entering the bakery seemed to dissolve, giving way to a feeling of belonging. He smiled at everyone around him, a genuine smile he hadn't given in a long time. "I thought everyone had forgotten me," he said, looking at the people surrounding him. "I thought that without Clara, nothing would make sense anymore, but seeing all of you here, treating me with such kindness and respect, makes me realize that perhaps I still have a place in this world." The young woman who had spoken about the hospital placed her hand on Elias's shoulder and smiled. "You will always have a place here, Mr. Carter." In a gesture of solidarity, she pulled up a chair and sat beside him, showing that he was not alone. Daniel, witnessing the scene, felt that this moment was more than just a simple meal. It was the beginning of something greater, the rebuilding of a man who, for so long, had been a cornerstone for everyone around him. Elias, surrounded by the faces now offering him support, felt a wave of warmth wash over him. For years, he had carried the weight of loneliness, believing that no one remembered who he was or what he had done in the past. But there, sitting in that bakery that had once been the stage for so many memories, he felt hope being reborn. Daniel, watching the scene with satisfaction, took a step forward. "Elias," he said in a firm and friendly voice, "I know your journey to this point hasn't been easy, and I also know there's still much to be done, but I want you to know that you are not alone." He extended his hand as if to seal a commitment. Elias looked at Daniel's outstretched hand and hesitated for a moment. He was used to refusing help, hiding behind pain and wounded pride, but something in Daniel's eyes and the sincerity of the people around him made him realize that this was an opportunity to change, to open himself up to something new. With a deep sigh, he accepted Daniel's hand, and the handshake was firm. "Thank you, Daniel," Elias said, a slight smile on his face, his eyes shining with new enthusiasm. "I accept your help, and if there is anything I can do to give back, no matter how small, I will do it." Daniel nodded, smiling. "Of course, there is something you can do." He turned to Liam and ordered him to prepare another round of coffee for everyone around. "Let's start simply, Elias. What do you think about helping me serve the coffee? It will be a good start, and gradually, you will get familiar with the people who frequent the place." Elias was surprised but at the same time felt a slight relief. It wasn't a grand task, but it was a start, and perhaps it was what he needed. He nodded and got up, following Daniel to the counter. Liam, who had initially treated Elias with disdain, now looked at him with a mix of respect and regret. I'm sorry for what I said earlier, Mr. Carter. I didn't know it was you," he stammered, visibly uncomfortable. Elias smiled, waving his hand as if to dissipate any tension. "It's all right, kid. You were just doing your job. Now let's leave that behind." He picked up one of the coffee trays and began to help distribute the orders to the customers still in the bakery. As Elias moved from table to table, the customers greeted him with smiles and words of encouragement. For many, seeing him there, even in such a humble situation, was a sign of courage. The same figure who had once been a symbol of power and success in the city now showed humility in gratitude, accepting to start over, unafraid to expose himself. One of the customers, an elderly lady holding her granddaughter's hands, smiled as she received coffee from Elias. "It's so good to see you back, Elias," she said. "I hope you find a little peace bit by bit." Elias returned the smile, touched by her words. "Thank you," he replied sincerely. "I am trying, one step at a time." As he and Daniel worked together to serve the customers, the atmosphere in the bakery became warmer, as if everyone was united by a feeling of solidarity. People continued to chat, sharing stories about Elias and remembering how he had helped so many of them in the past. The bakery, which had once been just a place of work and casual meetings, now felt like a center of reconnection and support. Daniel, seeing Elias interact with the customers, felt that his decision to offer help to the former millionaire was being rewarded. He knew Elias's journey would still be long, but seeing that man who had once lost everything begin to reconnect with the community and accept their support was a promising sign. After some time serving the customers, Daniel took Elias back to the counter. "I think you did a great job today, Elias. Let's call it a day for now, but starting tomorrow, I want you to come every day, and we will work together. Little by little, you will find your rhythm." Elias nodded, feeling grateful and, for the first time in a long time, useful. "Thank you, Daniel. I don't know how I will repay what you are doing for me, but know that I am truly grateful." Daniel gave Elias a friendly pat on the back. "Don't worry about that right now. Just show up tomorrow, and we'll do what we do best, serve and connect people." The next day, Elias arrived early at the bakery as Daniel had suggested. He wore simple, clean clothes that Daniel had provided for him, and he seemed more cheerful, standing taller with a slight sparkle in his eyes. It was as if, slowly but surely, he was starting to feel part of something again. The bakery was already bustling, and Daniel greeted him with a warm smile. "Good to see you, Elias. Ready for another day?" "Ready," Elias replied, feeling the lightness of purpose. "Thank you for giving me this chance." Daniel handed him a clean apron. "You are going to do an excellent job, I'm sure of it. Let's start with something simple. Help me organize the bread and serve coffee to the customers." Elias nodded and soon got involved in the tasks. As he served the customers, many greeted him warmly, some sharing memories of how he and Clara were beloved. Elias listened attentively, his eyes sometimes welling up when Clara's name was mentioned. It was painful but comforting to know that she was still remembered fondly by so many people. However, as the day progressed, he realized that some scars from the past were still open. A younger customer who clearly did not know his story murmured upon seeing him serve coffee, "It's strange to see an old man like that working here. He seems out of place." Elias heard this, and for a moment, he felt the weight of prejudice and judgment he had always feared. He lowered his head and continued his work, but the young woman's words hurt him deeply. It was as if, despite all the support he had received, there were still those who saw him only as a shadow of who he once was. Daniel, noticing Elias's downcast expression, approached and touched his shoulder. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked with concern in his eyes. Elias took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. Yes, It's still difficult sometimes. I feel out of place, like I don't belong in this world anymore. Daniel looked at him with empathy. I understand how you feel, Elias, but remember, you belong here. This place, this community, it's all yours too. What people say doesn't always reflect the truth about who you are. He smiled, trying to cheer him up. And to me, you are someone who deserves all the second chances in the world. Elias tried to smile but still felt the weight of the young woman's words. Nevertheless, he continued with his tasks, determined not to let a negative comment affect him. However, while serving the next customer, an older man dressed in simple clothes called out his name, "Just Elias?" Elias stopped and looked at him. "Yes, it's me." The man smiled broadly. "I can't believe it. Do you remember me? I'm Vincent, the former manager of the factory you saved years ago when everyone thought we were going bankrupt." Elias was surprised, but soon a genuine smile formed on his face. "Vincent, of course, I remember. How are you?" "Better than ever, thanks to you," Vincent replied, shaking Elias's hand firmly. "If it weren't for that loan you gave us and the trust you had in us, many of my colleagues and I would have lost our jobs. My family is eternally grateful to you." Vincent's words brought warmth to Elias's heart. He remembered when, at the height of his career, he used his fortune not just to enrich himself but to help those in need. To see that even after so much time, someone still carried that gratitude with them was a relief to his spirit. "Thank you, Vincent," Elias said, feeling a weight lift from his chest. "It's good to know that at least I did something right." "You did much more than that," Vincent replied with a smile. "And I see that once again, you are rising up. No matter what others say, Elias, what matters is that those who truly know you, those who were touched by what you did, are by your side." Daniel, who was watching the interaction from a distance, smiled. He knew that Elias still carried many good ghosts from the past, but every small reunion and every gesture of support were important steps for his recovery. Touched by the conversation with Vincent, Elias realized that despite the scars he still carried, there was something in his journey that was worth it. He returned to work with renewed energy, determined to focus on those who supported him rather than on the words of those who didn't truly know him. "Let's keep going, Daniel," he said with a firmer smile. "We still have a lot of coffee to serve and many stories to tell." Daniel nodded, pleased to see Elias gradually regaining his strength. "That's it, Elias. One step at a time, and soon you'll see that the scars of the past can become marks of resilience." In the days that followed, Elias began to integrate more and more into the routine of the bakery. Every morning he arrived early, ready to help Daniel and the rest of the team. The work, which at first seemed like an effort just to keep himself occupied, now transformed into an act of reconnection with the people around him. He served customers with a shy smile, and many greeted him with respect and affection, creating a new support network. Seeing Elias's progress, Daniel decided it was time to take a step further. He knew his friend needed something more than just work to rebuild his life, something that would bring true purpose, a renewed sense of direction to move forward. One morning, after a particularly busy period, Daniel called Elias for a conversation. "Elias, you've been doing an excellent job here. The energy you've brought to the bakery is something I haven't seen in a long time," he said with a smile. And I've been thinking of a way to help you even more. Elias, curious, furrowed his brow. Help more? You've already done so much for me, Daniel. I couldn't ask for anything more. Daniel shook his head. It's not about asking, it's about creating something together, something that brings a positive impact for all of us. He paused before continuing. I've been thinking, what if we transformed this bakery into something more than just a place for coffee? What if we made it a space to help people who, like you, are trying to get back on their feet? Elias was surprised. A space to help people? What do you mean? Daniel smiled, excited about the idea. Well, many people in the city are going through hardships, some lose their jobs, others face personal or family issues, and I believe we can make a difference, just like you did for so many people in the past. We can create a program here at the bakery to offer free meals to those in need or even small jobs for those trying to start over. You know how much an opportunity can mean to someone, right? Elias fell silent, absorbing the proposal. The idea of transforming the bakery into a place where he and Daniel could lend a hand to those in need deeply touched him. For so many years, he had been the one extending that hand, and now, by reversing that role, he felt he could be part of something bigger. Daniel, Elias said, emotional. You have no idea how much this means to me. After everything I've been through, knowing that I can help again, even in a different way, gives me a reason to move forward. Daniel smiled broadly. I'm glad you're on board. I knew this idea would make sense to you. He placed his hand on Elias's shoulder. Let's do this together, and who knows, the bakery might become a symbol of new beginnings for everyone. The two spent the rest of the day discussing the project's details. Daniel wanted to start small, offering one free meal a week to those who were struggling. Elias, excited about the idea, suggested organizing community events to raise funds and food, ensuring that the bakery had enough resources to sustain the program. He would use his old connections and try to reconnect with people who had once supported him. By the end of the week, the project took shape. Elias, alongside Daniel, organized the bakery's first event, a community soup night where anyone in need could come and serve themselves at no cost. They put up posters around the city, and Daniel used social media to promote the initiative. On the day of the event, the bakery was packed. People from all corners of the city showed up, some seeking help, others just to support the cause and give back for what Elias had done for them in the past. While serving soup and fresh bread, Elias looked at the faces around him, feeling that he was finally finding his place again. One of the customers, a younger man who was clearly struggling, approached Elias. I heard about what you're doing here, he said, his eyes filled with gratitude. I lost my job a few months ago and I've been struggling to get by. Today, being able to come here and receive a hot meal, I can't express how grateful I am. Elias placed his hand on the man's shoulder, feeling the emotion of knowing that once again, he was impacting someone's life. We all need a new beginning, he said with a warm smile. And we're here to help in any way we can. As the night unfolded, Elias and Daniel worked tirelessly, serving dishes, listening to stories, and offering words of support. The bakery, illuminated by warm lights and the sound of conversations, felt more alive than ever. For Elias, that moment was proof that he still had much to offer the world and that his story was far from over. At the end of the event, as they closed the bakery, Daniel and Elias sat down to rest. "I think it was a success," Daniel said, smiling with satisfaction. "And all thanks to you, Elias." "No, Daniel," Elias replied with a genuine smile. "It was thanks to us." He looked around, feeling his heart light. "I think I finally found something worth fighting for again." Daniel nodded, happy to see his friend's transformation. "And we'll keep fighting together, Elias. One step at a time, rebuilding not just your life but the lives of everyone who crosses our path." With the success of the community event, the bakery became a reference point for those seeking a fresh start in the city. Elias and Daniel, united by a strengthened friendship and a common purpose, began planning new initiatives to help the community. The bakery, once a simple gathering place for coffee and fresh bread, transformed into a true center of welcome and solidarity. Every morning, Elias arrived early with renewed energy. He organized the bread, prepared the coffee, and greeted customers with a genuine smile. He gradually became the heart of the bakery, and customers, both old and new, came not just for the food but for the warm presence of the man who served them and listened attentively. He understood how important it was to have someone listen, to offer a word of comfort, especially when life seemed tough. One morning, while Elias and Daniel were discussing plans for the next community event, a woman walked in. She was about 40 years old, dressed simply but with a look of determination. As she approached the counter, she hesitated, seeming a bit nervous. "Good morning," Elias said with a smile. "How can I help you?" The woman smiled back, but there was something in her eyes, a mix of gratitude and emotion. "I heard about what you were doing here. It's amazing to see how such a simple place can transform lives. I went through a very difficult time a few years ago, and if it weren't for programs like this, I don't know what would have become of me." Elias was touched by her words. "I'm glad to know that our work is making a difference. That's why we're here." The woman then extended her hand to him. "My name is Sophia, and I am the coordinator of an organization that supports people in vulnerable situations. I've been observing your work and would like to propose a partnership. We can provide food, clothing, and even financial resources so you can expand your initiatives and help even more people." Daniel, who was next to Elias, got excited about the proposal. "That would be amazing, Sophia. We have big plans for the bakery, but resources are always limited. With your help, we could really expand and impact even more lives." Elias felt his heart warm, seeing how the work he and Daniel were doing was attracting the attention of others and how they could multiply their efforts. "Sophia, your help will be very welcome," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "Let's turn this place into something even greater." The partnership with Sophia's organization brought new opportunities. In a few weeks, the bakery began distributing food baskets to families in need, as well as offering training courses in baking for those looking to learn a new trade. Elias became an instructor for these courses, sharing his knowledge and experience, and he saw how each small achievement of the students was a personal victory for him as well. One day, during a class, one of the students, a young man named Theo, approached Elias with a shy smile. "Mr. Elias, I just wanted to say that this opportunity has changed my life. I was unemployed and hopeless, but now I feel that I can build something new. Thank you for believing in me." Elias, with shining eyes, smiled and placed his hand on Theo's shoulder. Thomas, you are doing very well. Believe me, we all go through tough times, but that's what strengthens us. You have a bright future ahead. Seeing how his story and efforts were inspiring others gave Elias a new sense of purpose. He was no longer the man who had lost everything. He was someone who, through the generosity and support of those around him, was finding new ways to reinvent himself and help others do the same. At the end of a long day of work, Daniel and Elias sat outside the bakery, watching the bustle of the city. The lights were shining, and the laughter and conversations of people filled the air. Daniel, with a satisfied smile, looked at Elias. It seems we've made it, my friend. The bakery is now a place of hope. Elias nodded, feeling truly at peace for the first time in years. That's true, Daniel, he replied. And it all started with a simple act of solidarity. Now, this place has transformed into something much greater than we could have imagined. Daniel smiled, happy to see his friend's transformation. And all thanks to you, Elias. You've always had a generous heart. Now we are just multiplying the impact that you've always known how to create. Elias looked at the sky and for a moment thought of Clara. He knew that she would be proud of him, of how he had risen again and found a new path. I think I have finally found my place, Daniel, and it's here, alongside people who want to make a difference. Daniel placed his hand on Elias's shoulder and smiled. We still have a lot of work to do, but together, I know we can achieve so much more. And so, Elias continued his journey, no longer as the man who had lost everything but as someone who, alongside friends and a community willing to come together, was transforming lives and building a legacy of hope and solidarity. The bakery had become a symbol of new beginnings, and Elias, an example of how even when everything seems lost, there is always a new chance to start over and find purpose. End of video script. Call to action. Hey, if you're touched by this story like I was, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that warm the heart. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder that there's always hope for a new start. And don't forget to check out the video on the final screen, you'll be moved.